Again, welcome everybody. We're going to be doing quite a few different forums. This is for House District 23, and I'm Phil Hammond. I'm with LandSource. I'm a commercial realtor. I'm co-chair of the Shawnee Governmental Affairs Committee, and it's my honor to moderate today. On behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council, a collaboration of all 10 area chambers of commerce, and particularly on behalf of today's co-host, which happens to be Shawnee, Lenexa, and Overland Park Chamber, because we have one district that goes a little bit into Overland Park. I'd like to begin by sharing the format for this afternoon. We will start with a 3-minute opening statement by each candidate, a moderated question and answer period during which time the candidates each have a minute and a half to answer the questions or respond, following at the end a 2-minute closing statement. The format, the questions, and time limits will be the same for every candidate, and due to time constraints, there will be no follow-up questions. Formal rebuttals or anything along those lines, so you would want to include those in your opening statements or closing statements. Questions have been prepared in advance by the chamber staff. We will begin House District 23, and at this point we've already drawn to see the order of who will respond, and starting out today will be our candidate, which is Susan Ruiz, I believe I said that right? Sure. Democratic candidate, has a master's degree in social work from Our Ladies of the Lake University in San Antonio, and for over 2 decades has been a licensed clinical social worker in Kansas and Missouri, working with adults in several mental illness. It currently is with Truman Medical Center, and she lives in Shawnee. And number 2 will be Representative Linda Gallagher, Republican incumbent, was first elected to the House in 2014. Prior to that, had a career in journalism before serving as executive director of a trade association for heating and cooling contractors. Linda and her husband live in Lenexa. And so we will start out with the opening statements, and we will start out with Susan.
Hi, good afternoon. I would like to first thank Phil for being the moderator in the Johnson County Public Policy Council and the chambers of Shawnee, Lenexa, and Overland Park for sponsoring this event. What I want to say is that although that I do not have experience as a state legislator already, I am a citizen of the state of Kansas. I moved to Kansas 25 years ago, and to work to serve some of the most vulnerable populations in the state of Kansas as a social worker. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I will stand up against extremism and bring back some common sense leadership to Kansas.
Okay, thank you. And then candidate 2, Linda.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for commentating, moderating the debate today. And also, I want to thank the Overland Park, Lenexa, and Shawnee Chambers of Commerce for sponsoring this event on behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council. I am Linda Gallagher, and I have represented House District 23 since January 2015, and I'm running for my 3rd term. The district includes parts of Shawnee, Lenexa, and Overland Park. And I have lived in Johnson County ever since I graduated from KU with a journalism degree, and I've lived in Lenexa in House District 23 for the last 36 years. My husband Mike and I have 2 grown daughters, Lori and Katie, who attended Shawano Elementary, Trail Ridge Middle School, and Shawnee Mission Northwest High School in the district, in Shawnee Mission School District. I was actively involved in PTA and booster clubs throughout the time our daughters were in school, and supporting public education is a priority for me. I also was a Girl Scout leader for 14 years. I have made the welfare of children and seniors and social services my niche in the legislature, out of my concern for the most vulnerable people in Kansas and the shrinking state support for safety net programs. I am vice chair of the Children and Seniors Committee, and I serve on the Social Services Budget Committee, Transportation, and Government Technology and Security Committees as well. I am also a member of the Child Welfare System Task Force and vice chair of its Reintegration and Permanency Placement Working Group. I have worked to preserve the Children's Initiatives Fund and to protect early childhood programs. The top 3 policy issues in my campaign are education, economic recovery, and restoring the good reputation of Kansas. Public education should be supported and adequately funded. We must continue the process of getting Kansas finances back on track by crafting fiscally sound tax and budget policies so we can adequately fund essential services, such as schools, social services, highways, and infrastructure and public safety. And we must restore Kansas's reputation by bringing back Kansas common sense, getting out of people's personal lives, and increasing transparency and solvency. The legislature made great progress in the 2017-2018 biennium, and I am proud of our accomplishments. But there is much more work to be done to get Kansas back on the right track and to fully recover from the budget hole we found ourselves in a few years ago. I want to continue the work I have begun in my first 2 terms, and I ask for your vote on November 6th general election. Thank you.
Okay, we are now going into the question and answer period, and their responses will be 1.5 minutes on each one. The first question will go to Linda, and that question is, what are your views on state tax policy?
Okay. I voted for the 2017 tax reform bill, and that rolled back the 2012 income tax cuts, and voted to override Governor Brownback's veto of that bill. This stabilized our Kansas financial crisis and restored balance to our 3-legged stool of property, sales, and income taxes. We should not allow any one of these to become disproportionately high, which disadvantages certain sectors of the economy or certain taxpayers. Taxes should be fair and equitable for all taxpayers and are necessary to provide the needed funds to provide essential state services. Passage of the tax reform bill restored revenues and allowed our state to begin climbing out of the budget crisis we found ourselves in, during which there were 9 rounds of budget cuts and 3 credit rating downgrades. We can't afford to backslide now with a return to the irresponsible tax cut policy. With the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on internet sales taxes, I would support reasonable legislation to do that. It would level the playing field for local stores. And I would like to use the revenue from that to lower the sales tax on food. Kansas has the 2nd highest food sales tax of all 50 states, and my constituents frequently mention that as a concern.
Okay, and the same question to Susan. What are your views on state tax policy?
I will not support a tax structure that looks anything like the Brownback experiment. We must support the middle class and not add any more tax burden to lower income families. I strongly support eliminating the food sales tax. If we want to continue to attract new industry, our communities must look more attractive. Having one of the highest grocery sales taxes in the state, or really in the country, isn't very welcoming.
Okay, the second question will go first to Susan, and that is, with record low unemployment rates challenging businesses' ability to find enough employees, what would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
I strongly feel that we really must grow a diverse workforce within the state by providing equal access to quality education and promote community colleges and trade schools. Part of the workforce struggles is in the area of skilled labor, such in the areas like in plumbing, electrical, and construction work. We must attract a diverse workforce from outside of the state by attracting new industry that will bring new workers into the state who will contribute economically to the state.
Thank you. And Linda, same question. With record low unemployment rates, challenging businesses' ability to find enough workers? What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
I would support sound fiscal policies to continue our state's economic recovery, first of all, and create a stable business environment for Kansas employers so they will be able to expand and create new jobs. I support the Kansas Department of Education's Kansans Can vision and program, to better educate our students to prepare them for the workforce needs of the future, and also for post-secondary education. I am glad that this Kansas Can program includes an emphasis on career technical education. I hear a lot of time from employers that that is something they're lacking in, is enough employees with skilled trades. Not everyone is suitable for four-year education, and career technical education is certainly needed.
Thank you. And question number 3 will first go to Linda. Topeka as a whole appears poised to refocus on the state's infrastructure. What would your positions be in any new statewide transportation plan?
I voted for the bill establishing the statewide transportation plan, task force, that is currently meeting weekly around the state to gather public input and lay the groundwork for the next comprehensive transportation plan. I serve on the House Transportation Committee, did the last 2 years, and I hope to be assigned to that again next session, where I look forward to working on legislation to implement this plan. Several Kansas bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete, and some Kansas roads are in poor condition. These must be addressed. A local priority is addressing the I-35 75th Street bottleneck. But the plan must address local and regional transportation needs all across the state. It should also include provisions for upgrading mass transit, airports, and railroads. Kansas is an important crossroads for transit and shipping of freight, and we must maintain and modernize our infrastructure to support that. The new transportation plan also must include provisions for funding, and it is essential that we stop sweeping funds from the transportation fund into our state general fund to go for to prop up budget shortfalls. That was one of the consequences of the irresponsible income tax cuts of the Brownback administration.
Thank you. Susan, the same question. What would your priorities be in any new statewide transportation plan?
The priority is absolutely, we must restore the funding that was taken out from the transportation budget and put into the general funds. That has to be the priority. The infrastructure, it just took a step back during the Brownback administration, and without having the funding for it, how is that funding going to be allocated to the different issues with infrastructure? So yes, any kind of initiatives that we might want to be able to place forward, we must have that funding, restore the funding.
Okay, thank you. We go on to question number 4, and Susan, you're up first. What are your views on funding K-12 education?
I really believe that every child should have equal access to quality education. We must invest in our children and give them every opportunity to succeed. It is time to end the court battles and fully fund our schools. I would like to see more funding for early education, early childhood education for children ages 3 to 5, and more funding for parents as teachers programs. The parents can access no matter how many children they have in the family. Currently, parents as teachers programs it's inadequately funded, and there is a long wait list for that, and only your first child can receive those services. So again, it's something that I think is a very a priority for us is early childhood education.
Good. Linda, same question. What are your views on funding K-12 education?
I have been concerned for years that the legislature has not been adequately funding public education. I voted for the school funding bills in both 2017 and 2018 sessions. As a result of these bills, we are closer to adequately funding schools than we have been since before the recession. I am confident the legislature will be able to address the issues raised by the Kansas Supreme Court in the Gannon 6 ruling last summer and appropriate from existing revenues the necessary extra funding that they called for to cover the cost of inflation over the next several years. That is, provided we have a governor and a makeup of the legislature who are willing to do that, to continue putting the needed funding into schools. I am pleased funding was increased for both pre-K and parents as teachers. I also have a soft spot in my heart for parents as teachers. It is essential that we prioritize early education so our youngest learners will be prepared for kindergarten and for educational success throughout their early years. Throughout their school years. I also would oppose a proposed constitutional amendment that would remove the Supreme Court from having the authority to rule over adequacy of school funding. There is going to be a push for that next session. There was last session, but it didn't come to a vote, and I absolutely oppose it. We have 3 separate and equal branches of government for a reason. It's basic civics, and we should not be removing, we need the judicial branch. Thank you.
Question number 5. That will first go to Linda. Describe what you see as the Kansas advantage when it comes to economic development and tourism, and the type of economic development policies you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas.
Okay. Well, Kansas is a unique place. It's it doesn't have mountains or oceans, but it has, thankfully today, a lot of blue sky. It was nice to see the sunshine again. And it has agritourism. There are a lot of places around the state where people can go and visit and learn about the importance of agribusiness to the state. We also have a very active transportation industry,
Travel industry.
I'm sorry, Travel Industry Association of Kansas, thank you, that promotes local businesses, in the travel industry, and they do a good job of promoting things in Kansas that are good to go visit. And I like to get around and get off the interstate and go visit places in Kansas that I have never been to before, although I grew up in western Kansas and have a great respect for that. The second part was?
Job growth and business expansion.
Okay. I support promoting employment across Kansas, high performance incentive programs, STAR bonds, and other Commerce Department programs. Economic development incentives should be used to bring in new companies to the state rather than lure companies across the state line. But the best economic development measure we can do is to ensure we have adequate funding of our schools, both K-12 and higher education, so that are preparing our students for the workforce needs of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Susan, same question. What types of economic development policies you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
Attracting businesses and investors requires many things. Good schools, good infrastructure, and a place that is welcoming to them as individuals. If the state loses support in any of these areas, then we risk lowering our status as a target for investors in business development.
Okay, thank you. The 6th question and final question, we'll start with Susan, and that is, what is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
The most important thing that I think distinguishes me from my opponent, from Linda, call her my opponent, it's Linda. She has a name. Is that I have worked as a clinical social worker for the past 25 years and really am working with the most vulnerable populations in Kansas. And that population are adults who have a severe mental illness. And I help people be able to try to bring some restoration back to their lives and being able to help them manage their mental illness. And the lack of health care is devastating to them. I have that hands-on experience. I can walk the walk, I can talk the talk.
Okay. And Linda, the same question. What distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
First of all, I have tremendous respect for Susan as a social worker and the work she does in mental health. In my work on the Children and Seniors Committee and the Social Services Budget Committee and the Child Welfare System Task Force, I have come to greatly respect the work of social workers and agree that we need more social workers in Kansas in all of these areas, and they need to be paid more, first of all. I do have 4 years of experience in the legislature that Susan does not. I have drunk from that fire hose facing me with all the information blasting at you when you join the legislature. And I have served in a leadership role the last 2 years as Vice Chair of Children and Seniors, and I am hope that I will be named Chair of that committee next year. And there will be important measures coming out of the Child Welfare System Task Force in its report to the legislature in January. And those measures most likely will come through the Children and Seniors Committee. I have a lot of experience in that and want to be able to see those through. I also just have, experience in a lot of other areas in the legislature, and as a resident of my district for 36 years, I know what makes it tick, what their needs are, their interests, and I've supported their local businesses, sent my kids to school in this district, and I am well suited to represent this district. Thank you.
Okay, now we move on to the 2-minute closing statements, and Linda, you will be the first one.
Just a second.
The time.
Got to reset the timer.
Gives me the time I need to.
Go ahead. Sorry.
When you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Again, I want to thank the 3 chambers of commerce for sponsoring this forum today. It's very helpful, I think, to provide an opportunity for people to come here in person, but also to watch on video the views of the people who seek to represent them in the legislature. As you can tell from the answers given by myself and my opponent, we share similar views on many issues. However, there are, as we discussed, some distinct differences between us that I believe are important for voters to keep in mind. I mentioned all of those already, so I won't go into it again. One of the differences between us is that I have a business background, whereas she has a social work background. I took 15 hours of business in addition to my journalism classes at KU, and as a business journalist, I have covered a variety of industries and written about many different business topics. My work with the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce gave me valuable insight into the metro area business community. And in 12 years of running a trade association for heating and cooling contractors, I gained knowledge of the challenges of running a small business. This experience has helped me to be an effective legislator representing the Lenexa, Shawnee, and Overland Park business communities. A lot of the measures we pass in the legislature have a direct effect on businesses in Kansas. And I am proud of the fact that I have I believe it's a 93 or 94% voting record with the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce on their priorities. In the last 2 years, I have 100% voting record with them. I also am proud to be endorsed by the by the KC BizPac of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce in partnership with the Civic Council. I'm also endorsed by a number of other organizations, Education First, Shawnee Mission, Game On for Kansas Schools, the Mainstream Coalition, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, and the Kansas Livestock Association. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Susan, your 2-minute closing statement.
Again, thank you to the chambers for sponsoring this event. I will have 3 priority issues if I am elected. One would be Medicaid expansion, another one would be voting rights, and the third would be school funding, especially funding needed for early childhood education. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Medicaid expansion. We have rural communities who are dying because hospitals are closing. And all of that, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't have Medicaid expansion. that does have an economic domino effect to everyone else in the state. Things become more costly for everyone else. So I really, really do feel like we need to really push for that Medicaid expansion. I'd also want to share with you that I'm a daughter of an immigrant. He came from Mexico, and I'm also a first-generation college graduate. But through my father, I learned lots about our civil rights and our duty to become an active citizen. This is why I am running, to represent you. I will take your voice with me to the legislature.
Well, thank you for both. That concludes our forum for the House District 23. Let's thank both of our, thank you again, and we'll take a short break until